Hi! Let's begin with a hypothetical. Let's say that we have a criminal trial where a husband is on trial for murder, and specifically the murder of his wife. And let's say that in the opening statements from the defense, the attorneys defending the father, that the attorneys say something to this effect. Now the prosecution is going to get up here, and what they're going to do is they're going to try and spin you a story. Because the fact of the matter is they can't point at anyone else except for this person as the possible killer. And that's because, ladies and gentlemen, all that they need for their story to make sense is a villain. And they picked this person to be a villain without any evidence to do so. And let's say that from there, the trial progresses. Goes on, you introduce witnesses, there's testimony, yada yada, the works, go watch a trial. And then let's say that we get to closing arguments, all right? Now at this point, defense counsel feels pretty good. They have a pretty good theme of trying to have a fantasy or a story where they're trying to paint the father, the husband, as a villain. And they feel pretty confident about that. They feel pretty confident that the jury is going to resonate with that. They feel pretty confident that everyone in the room gets the idea that they're trying to sell. And let's say that the prosecuting attorney gets up and says this. Members of the jury, you all just heard defense counsel go on and on about how we're trying to spin a story and how we're trying to pick this person, the husband of the murdered woman, as a villain. Members of the jury, not only is that not what we're doing, not only have we presented more than enough evidence to be able to meet our burden today, but that's literally what they have been doing since the beginning. They've been trying to paint all of this on the fucking love affair of the wife, who wasn't even in the state at the time of the murder. They can't even explain how this person would have otherwise committed this crime, but that's the only other person they could possibly pin by virtue of some conceptual motive. We aren't trying to spin a story. We're not trying to spin a fantasy. We're not the ones trying to look for a villain. They are. And let's say that after hearing this, the jury goes back and they find the husband to be guilty. Question: was it the fact that the defense attorney used the theme that they did at all that caused them to lose the trial? Hey everyone, how's it going? I'm sorry, I can't be as animated. There are things on my chest now and I need to be careful with how much I move around my arms. You hopefully get the gist. I'm sorry, hold on. Are you all, I was not looking at chat. Are you all actually talking about fucking this? Stop it. Stop being horny. I don't even care. I will nuke my chat, all right? Stop. No horny. How many of you actually paid attention to the hypothetical? I want to talk about the nature of slogans and specifically defund the police. There have been a lot of people, one of which who we're going to be talking about in a second, who have basically made the argument that we shouldn't capitulate to try and like dummy down or water down or whatever the argument or the slogan, because, well, the reason it got so much attention is because it's effective. By virtue of how effective it is, well, that just means that we should have done it and probably done it more, because that's how we actually get policy change, right? I don't agree with this position, but I want to treat it fairly, right? Like, I'm not trying to come in and like say that it's like an unreasonable position. I think it's understandable why people can come to that position. And so the person who we're going to be talking about who just made this argument, it could have been any of a number of people, but this person had to have made, but this person had to happen to have made a video on it. So I want to kind of do a dialectic, right? So no surprise here. Yeah, Thought Slime made a video on this. A lot of you probably have seen it. It did very well. And I'm going to say up front, I like the video, right? I think it makes decent arguments. I don't agree with the arguments, but I'm not going to come in here and try to like shit on Thought Slime personally. There's more to consider when you are trying to figure out a slogan for a movement than just whether or not it's going to be inflammatory or not.
Hello, it's me, T.S. Eliot. The whole time, the T.S. stood for Thought Slime. Barack Obama, who I'm not a big fan of incidentally, was president of the United States roughly 30 years ago. In an interview with, I don't know, who's this guy? Peter Hambly, Obama said these words in this order.
If you believe, as I do, that we should be able to reform the criminal justice system so that it's not biased and treats everybody fairly, I guess you can use a snappy slogan like defund the police, but you know you've lost a big audience the minute you say it, which makes it a lot less likely that you're actually going to get the changes you want done.
People might take some flack from me, and I'll explain this more as we go on. I fundamentally think I agree with that argument. It's important to understand that if we want to be able to get legislation passed, there's a lot of ways to be able to go about strategically doing so. And when you are making a slogan, there are a lot of dimensions that go into making a good slogan. When you say something like defund the police, that does not register to a lot of people as what most people mean when they say it, when they're actually unironically making the argument, which is, well, there are some police departments which are overfunded, and we should take the funds from the overfunded police departments and put them more towards community outreach programs that are probably better suited to deal with certain situations than police, for example, with mental health and related instances, right? That's usually what people mean when they actually advocate for defund the police. But there is a strong argument that most people will hear that and will think that basically means get rid of the police. And I'm sorry, abolish the police is not popular right now. We went over a lot of studies before that kind of showed that like how you phrase certain issues has a big effect on whether or not people support them. And also there was a Maryland poll I tweeted about a couple weeks ago where it showed that like in a single poll, when people were asked whether or not they supported the idea of taking funds from overfunded police departments and putting them towards other programs in communities, people, you know, the majority of people who responded supported that, right? I think it was like over 50 or 60%. But when those same people were asked, do you support the idea of defund the police? That dropped to like 20, right? Because most people do not register defund the police as take funds from overfunded police departments and put them towards other things.
Not shocked that he would think that, don't get me wrong. I think it's faulty logic that he's using to disguise the fact that what he really means is you shouldn't ask for things that aren't part of his political project. But he's tapped into the old...
I think that's speculation. Like, I think that what Obama is eliciting is like a very real criticism of a slogan that's done some harm to the left, right? So I wouldn't say that that's like a good representation of that.
This trick in the neoliberal playbook. The same strategy that I feel like I've been complaining about over and over and over. And nobody listens to me because I've cultivated a certain vibe. You just pretend like all the reasonable people already agree with you, and then tell anyone who doesn't agree with you that you're just looking out for them. What you want is impossible, and you're like a little infant for wanting it. And what me and my cool class of friends all agree about is that what you're saying... a little out there. And I don't know.
I'm not gonna, like, it's basically, he said, like we're talking about hearsay and speculation, right? There's not much I can argue other than just saying, I don't think that's what people believe. I think that there's a reasonable disagreement about like the proper ways to be able to rhetorically go over getting like legislation passed.
I don't know why this works so well. I don't know what it is. There's just something embedded into the psyche of us Westerners where we just want authority figures to take us seriously for some reason. We want to be the big smarties, to the point that if anyone else tells us what we're doing makes us look like we're not smart or not serious, that's the quickest way to make us step in line. Now, it's true that a snappy slogan, like defund the police, loses people. Of course, it loses everyone who would be put off by the idea of defunding the police, naturally. The thing people who use that slogan want to do. It's very telling that Obama sees rhetoric not as a method of clarifying policy objectives, but selling them to people.
Okay, this is the first major point of contention. Let's be clear. It's not just the fact that it's a snappy slogan and snappy slogans inherently lose people, right? There is an art to being able to craft a slogan, or to analogize to legal practice or courtroom practice, a theme, to make sure that it accomplishes one of several things. Hopefully all of them. Actually, I do have to go full screen for this because this is the main issue, right? Like, I really want to drill this home. There are a handful of things that you want to make sure you're able to get across when you are having a slogan, because slogans are good, right? Like, they are the things that are able to drill into people's minds your ideas, right? I remembered learning a couple of years ago when I was just starting mock trial and court advocacy, right? Most people will probably retain in the course of a trial about 30% of what is said maximum. You want your side to win, then you want to make sure that if they, if the jury only remembers 30% of the things that are said, that at least part of that 30% is your main idea, right? You want to make sure it's snappy. You want to make sure that it gets in their mind. But there are a couple very specific qualities, right? It has to be short, sweet, to the point. It has to be something that will stick in your mind, right? It has to be something that's not corny, ideally. Like one example of like a really corny theme that's always used by like really bad debaters or really bad people in mock trial is, oh, the other side stacked the deck against us, right? Or it's like you have to decide the scales of justice, or like some vague illusion of you have to do what justice deserves and liberty demands, or some vague shit like that. Like that's corny. So do things that are snappy, do things that aren't corny, do things which accurately convey your ideas, right? This is very important because here, when you say defund the police, most people do not, like, even if ThoughtSlime, like I think that ThoughtSlime just conceded that actually that does fairly represent what most people think. I don't agree with that. I don't think that when you say defund the police, heavy quotations, that equates to what most people hear. When most people hear defund the police, they think get rid of the police fucking entirely, not take funds away from overfunded police departments and put them towards social programs. That's a problem because your slogan has a fundamental issue that it does not convey the idea the way that you want it to without a broad explanation. All right? So that's another issue. And the last issue, and the most important issue that no one talks about, but I'm going to drill into your minds right now, is you have to have a theme or a slogan that cannot be flippable. What do I mean when I say that? You have to have a theme or an idea that cannot be taken by the other side and used against you. Remember back to the hypothetical at the beginning, right? We're talking about the theme of, oh, the other side is just trying to paint a story where they're just trying to look for any person to be a villain. The problem with that is that even if it is catchy, it drills an idea into people's heads pretty easily. And it may otherwise convey the idea that you want to. The other side, in 9 times out of 10, because this happens a lot in the courtroom settings, like that's not an uncommon theme. People will use that against the side that uses it first time and time and time again, and it works. And so the problem here with defund the police are 2 problems, right? The first, at least in my opinion, because while it is snappy, while it does stick in people's minds, everyone knows it right now. Congratulations, you have like 2 good ideas down about defund the police. But it doesn't clearly convey the idea that you want it to, at least in my opinion. How many Republicans have you all heard basically take that to be like a signal that the radical left is trying to take away the police and take away all their jobs, and they're trying to invade politics with communism and socialism? If I could have gone back in time and proposed an alternative, one possibility probably would have been, in my opinion, probably to say like responsibly fund the police. And who the fuck is going to complain about responsibly funding the police? Right? Like, are Republicans seriously going to get up and be like, the radical communists want to responsibly fund the police? Like, sound good though? Well, it's better. That's just an example. Think of another better example, right? Because I mean, like, the thing about it is that like defund the police was basically the effort. Like, you could see it, right? Like, basically you started as it started historically, right? It started as ACAB, then it went to abolish the police, or those 2 kind of coexisted at once. And then it went from abolish the police to defund the police. And that was like trying to water it down from there. So to go back to the video now, I would say that there's more I would disagree with the premise. Like basically ThoughtSlime just laid out that there's like this idea that like when you use slogans, you're inherently going to lose people. And I disagree with that. I think that there are things that you can do with slogans to make them better, to make them more accessible, and to make them reach a wider breadth of people. That's not a problem with slogans inherently. That's a problem with just figuring out the right slogan to use.
The guy who rose to his presidency on the promise of hope and change, which can mean anything, and thus won't lose people. Now, I will grant you that if you don't say the words defund the police, you may be able to attract allies who don't wish to defund the police. Good job. Those allies aren't going to be particularly useful towards your goal because they don't agree with it. Even if they could be made to agree with it, they never had a chance because nobody acclimated them to the idea for fear that they'd get spooked and run away.
This is one of the reasons why I don't hate the videos, because I do agree with this, right? This goes back to sort of the third point that I made. If you have a slogan, you do want to make sure that you're accurately conveying the idea that you want. If the idea that you want is to take funds from overfunded police departments and put them towards community programs, be firm about that, right? Don't give up that ground. And fortunately, right now, it seems like most people want that. It seems like the public is like largely in support of that, at least based on the polls that I've seen. So that's why I say right here, we're like, yeah, if you're going to rethink a slogan, don't rethink it so much that you just like throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? It's just a matter of thinking, all right, so like, what's the different way that we present this? And I understand that there have been some people who have been tweeting like,
oh yeah, we should totally re-say how we do this. Oh yeah, what we'll do instead is we'll say instead of defund the police, we'll say handle the police with mittens and give them a diaper and whatever.
That's really demeaning. Like, that's a very demeaning way to respond to like basically what is the right way to go about this, you know? We need to be able to learn about that, because the right does this. The right has the rhetoric game down, and we need to catch up. Proactive, not reactive. Yeah, I think that's a very good way to think about it.
Way into the woods. So maybe you could change your messaging, and then people might get on board. And then, once you've got everyone's support, you get some power, and then you do a different thing than what you said you'd do. Because if you said what you wanted to do, that might cause you to lose support. This strategy is called lying. It's not a great one, long term.
Yes, do not lie.
Or maybe you decide to limit the sum total of your political imagination to what you've assumed most people will already agree with. Forget your ideals or your conscience or whatever naive stuff. You count up all the people you'd gain from a statement, and then you count up all the people you'd lose from a statement, and you only say the things more people like. That's a very convenient way to operate, because it means you don't really have to believe anything. It's all just numbers, baby!
I think that this is, all right, so hold on. There's like a half truth and a half lie here, right? Obviously, don't just like capitulate your personal beliefs to whatever the majority of people believe, because as it turns out, the majority of people can be wrong, right? But like, for example, a really good, like a historic example, for my legislation class, I had to read about Lyndon Johnson and how he passed the Civil Rights Bill, right? Now, back then, overwhelmingly, the feel in the room was, at least from like Southerners, and back then it was Southern Democrats, because Democrats were like the more racist conservative party, history, yada, yada. The feel from some Southern Democrats was, black people bad, they do not deserve rights. Send tweet. So it was really hard to be able to pass a civil rights bill. And what it essentially required was a lot of rhetoric, a lot of deal making, and a lot of very good legislative or a lot of very good, you know, work as a legislator to be able to get a civil rights bill passed. Now, was it the civil rights bill that was originally promulgated? No, it had to be watered down a bit, because that was the only way that they were going to get it passed in the first place. When it was passed, it had to be watered down from what it was originally included, right? Like, I think it originally included a lot of like specific sections about trials and juries, right? Like basically the criminal justice system, and those had to be largely redacted. My memory is a little fuzzy, so if people in the comments or later on correct me on that, then I apologize. That's just to the best of my memory. Those had to be redacted, because otherwise the Southern Democrats would not sign on to the bill and it would not have been passed, right? Yes, obviously don't base your personal beliefs on what the majority of people believe, but also recognize that like there are more than one way to be able to sway the majority opinion of what people believe in a society. If you are able to pass certain kinds of legislation that accomplish at least part of a goal, and people really like that, then you can use that as weaponry to be able to pass more bills doing more of the same kind of work in the future. So like, for example, a lot of places have been passing like a lot of police reform bills across the nation, usually in smaller amount, but like as more of them are passed, and like I know this because I had to do research this past summer specifically for the Attorney General's office, right? Like the way that you are able to convince people in state and federal legislatures to pass bills is primarily based off of what are other people doing in other states. If other states are doing smaller things, you have more ammunition to be able to do larger, more ambitious bills, because people know that they work and are trustworthy, right? So that's a long-winded way of saying, yes, do not base your personal beliefs off of just what what the majority of people believe, because then you're just a soulless husk, and you don't really have any principles that you base your beliefs off of. But also understand that sometimes being able to pass bills which have majority support can be ways or vehicles for being able to pass other forms of legislation which accomplish other things you want to do on the same subject later on.
The downside to this strategy is sometimes most people think some really stinky stuff. If your methodology is just to say whatever you think is popular, and your opponent's strategy is to change what's popular, you end up just doing what they want. Or at the very least, making concession after concession to them until your agenda becomes virtually indistinguishable from theirs. So if
basically the way that you avoid having this happen is to make sure that you are fundamentally elected on a platform where you have certain core ideals fundamental to your beliefs, right? Like Bernie. This is the reason why Bernie has been in office for as long as he has, despite not being able to pass as much legislation based on his beliefs, is because his constituents know what he believes in and they support him, right? That's good, because it means that eventually, as long as people keep electing him in, and hopefully other people with similar beliefs, I'm looking at you, chat, then eventually those kind of laws and those kind of beliefs will be able to be codified into law.
The thing we might do instead is convince people of the things that we believe in. This process will require us to say them out loud. For example, if I...
Yes, and we should. It's just, remember, there are different ways to be able to convince people. Like, if the goal is to be able to convince people, you have to be able to use like a diversity of tactics. But it is very important just to recognize that, like, yes, say what you believe to other people. Just make sure to put it in such a way that it is most accessible to them, and you will get a much better mileage. Okay? Okay? Cool.
I believe we should defund the police, and I do, then I don't think it's a wacky idea for babies. I think it's a good idea for smart adults who read big books. Rather than just hiding that conviction, what I do,
I can't tell if when he says, yeah, I believe in defunding the police, that what ThoughtSlime is saying is like, oh yeah, we should totally like abolish the police effectively, or if he's saying, oh no, instead we should take funds away from overfunded police departments and put them towards other social programs. I don't know which ThoughtSlime is specifying right now. I will say that if they are if this is basically saying abolish the police, regardless of whether or not you agree with that, that will never be passed in our lifetime. With someone with some degree of legislative experience, like, that is a much harder sell than saying, oh yeah, there are certain police departments that are overfunded. We should take away those overfunded funds and put them towards other programs, right?
See, is talk to people about why I believe the thing I believe. And some people will not agree. That's fine. Some people will be quite upset. That's fine too. Fact of the matter is, controversy kind of helps get the idea of free publicity. Like, the right knows this, right? The right does this with everything. You ever see a right-winger modulate their tone because they're afraid they might lose people? You ever see them walk back their talking points lest they look immoderate?
This goes back again to the four main things that we want to have when we're talking about slogans, right? Again, the right is good at doing this, you know? Like, they are able to promote slogans. It's not just like tone policing, right? Like, there's this larger understanding, going back to the original things, of making sure that you have an idea that clearly conveys what you mean and that the other side cannot flip and use against you, right? Because by virtue of the fact that Republicans can basically call whatever they want socialism, they have a lot harder of a time, or they would have a lot harder of a time trying to take something like responsibly fund the police and say that that's evidence of socialism and communism than taking defund the police and saying that that's socialism and communism, right? That's the point, right? It's just making sure, it's basically like kind of a game of making sure that you are limiting as many options that the other side has available to be able to choose from, right? I would say that it would be much harder for them to be able to sell to the average unaffiliated, moderate, whatever you want to say, middle American, the idea that the radical left is trying to destroy the police with this slogan of defund the police, right? It's a lot harder for them to make that sell, because they will lie either way, but it's a lot harder for them to make that sell when the slogan is not defund the police and is instead responsibly fund the police, right? One sounds more reasonable, I hate to tell you, to the average person, and the other doesn't really sound like it sounds like it's a real stretch to a lot of people. There can be some work done trying to reach across the aisle and convince like the people who are like totally on that other side. But like for the most part with like big cultural issues like this, the real battleground is reaching the middle American who is pretty undecided on the issue, right?
No, they're just out there chanting about killing anyone they think is a secret Antifa or whatever and huffing COVID farts to prove the pandemic is a hoax. They know the fact that their beliefs are controversial mean they're going to be given tons of free exposure by every necktie on CNN and MSNBC who prattles back and forth about how gosh darn rude they're being. But of course, they won't disagree too hard. That might lose people.
I feel like it's very demeaning to basically take like what is very important political practice for being able to get things passed into law and demean them down to, oh, well, if we just say that the things that are too inflammatory, well, we might lose too many people. Because like that's not a wrong statement, you know? Like if you do use bad rhetoric, you will lose people.
And the other side of the coin becomes, geez, woof. Don't know about that one. There's no space to talk about what you want to talk about, only to tut-tut at what someone else wants to talk about. Now, I don't think defund the police is the best possible slogan. I'm sure that if we workshopped it, got a bunch of PR companies on the job, we could maybe come up with a better one. And I certainly don't think it's the best objective, which would of course be to abolish the police and replace them with a more democratic institution that served the legitimate functions people associate with policing without the special privileges and unique class of people that are allowed to shoot you virtually unchallenged. But none of that's important. That's all beside the point. What makes the slogan useful is that people are already saying it. It already has momentum. So you're left with a choice. You can either spend a lot of time and energy.
Wait, hold on, no. This is a bad argument. Basically, like, just because it already has momentum does not mean that we should keep using it if it keeps doing a bad thing. Like, just by virtue of the fact that, like, oh, we're already doing this thing and a lot of people know it, and even if it's causing a lot of people to disagree with us, well, we should still use it because we're already using it, right? Like, that's no reason to not change our rhetoric to be able to reach more people. And if it's not working for us, then I don't really care how much it's been used. Don't use it if it's not accomplishing the goal, which is to be able to get funds from police departments to be able to be reallocated if those police departments are overfunded to other community programs. Like, if that's the goal and this is not accomplishing the goal, figure out another way to accomplish the goal.
Trying to stop them, trying to change it, trying to instead get them to say abolish the police or to hide their power levels or whatever. Or you can lean in and use the slogan as a springboard to a more nuanced conversation about the problems with policing.
I feel like that's not a great way to be able to do it. It's basically saying, oh yeah, we're going to use super like inflammatory language as a way to be able to like get people in. The problem with that is that what you're going to end up doing is like before you get into the conversation, you're already posturing the opposing side as like being antithetical to yours. Like everyone is talking about this right now. Congratulations. But you know what everyone is saying? Everyone is saying it's terrible and it's probably going to be used. And actually, I don't have to say probably, it is being used as an argument by Republicans to push back against police reform, right? Everyone's talking about it, but not in the way that you want to, in the way that's antithetical to accomplishing the goals that you want to be able to accomplish.
How come you guys call yourself anarchists? That's a scary word. You should pick a new name. And okay, I'll grant you anarchists don't have a very good public image. We could do this. You know, we could choose a new name as some sort of branding exercise. But like, it's okay, say that we do that. We call ourselves like
Presented without comment, an uninterrupted cut of how long it took me to think of a punchline for this joke.
But like, okay, let's say that we do that. Look, we're not anarchists anymore. We're peanut butter babies. That's the new name of this ideology.
Okay, and this is also like a very demeaning point. Again, like rhetoric is very important, and like this is one of the main reasons I do not like this video is because like it demeans a lot of counter arguments that are like rather substantive. If what you're trying to do is not convince people, then I guess fuck it. But I'm here to win. I want to get the most people on my side as possible, right? Like I want to pass laws. I want to like materially help people. I'm not trying to just sit here and cross my arms and be the most principled corpse on the pile of bodies because I wasn't going to try and like figure out how to make my ideas more presentable to more people.
Don't be scared. We're not anarchists. That's spooky. We're peanut butter babies now. The thing is, they're just going to demonize the name peanut butter baby. Maybe not that name in particular because it's too adorable, but you get the idea.
This is a stupid hypothetical. I don't know. Like, I don't know what like a more accessible name for anarchists is, right? Like racists fucking did this shit, right? Like instead of being racist, they're race realists instead, or they're white identitarians, right? Like the fucking they've done like the reactionaries and the alt-right do the shit fucking all the time, you know? Like, I don't know what y'all want to call yourselves, but like, if you want to rebrand yourself, then yeah. And the thing is that like, while people will still criticize it, like we still criticize race realists and white identitarians, it is harder for someone who does not know as much about the various political issues. That's the point, is because like for the people who are unaware and who are unradicalized to one side or the other, it can be a lot harder to criticize something that does not sound as harmful, right? Yeah.
Not the name which challenges the status quo, but what that name conveys. Similarly, the tone and word choice or whatever of defund the police is not what people take issue with. They'll swear up and down that that's what they take issue with. That them and you, they're on the same page. But the wording though, I would love to support you. It's just a little out there, you know?
I worry that this is not accurately representing the position, right? Because the wording is important, right? And we are on agreement. Again, if what we're trying to convey is the idea that there are certain overfunded police departments and we should take away those overfunded funds and put them more towards community programs that should deal with issues that some police should not deal with, right? Like, if that is what we are all advocating for, then yes, we are in agreement. And the problem is rhetoric, right?
No, like you and I get it. You and I get it, but the people in middle America, they don't get it. They're not as smart as you and I, right? What they're really against is the challenge that the statement poses to the status quo, to the cultural norm of police as above criticism or any kind of animosity or distrust.
No, the concern is to make sure that if you are pushing an idea, that you are pushing it in a way that is going to be able to most effectively and materially achieve the outcome or outcomes that you want. If what you are trying to advocate for is for taking funds away from overfunded police departments and putting them towards community programs, then cool. Most people in America are probably on board with that. It's about recognizing that people are open to certain possibilities, but if you try to push them too far, you will lose them. You gotta ease them in, right? If you need to explain your slogan, it probably doesn't accurately convey your idea.
Let's give this institution less money instead of all of the money. Cannot be allowed to proceed because it creates a dangerous precedent. People might start to think that they should have some say in how their communities are organized, that maybe the people and systems which govern their lives now don't have their best interests in mind. Therefore, it becomes necessary to convince them not only that what they want would be bad, actually, but also that they and everyone else don't even want it. So you're all alone with your weird ideas and you're scaring people. Look, your heart's in the right place, but we can't do the thing you're asking for right now, so there's no sense in talking about it ever and filling people's heads with weird ideas.
Again, the argument is not, to be clear, the argument is not to say that these goals, or at least if the goal is like defund the police, not abolish the police, former is achievable, latter is not, at least in my opinion. If the goal is to get defunding of the police, to take funds from overfunded police departments and put them towards community programs, that is an achievable goal right now. There have been polls showing that like the majority of people support that idea. Like people are behind that idea in America, right? Like that is an achievable thing to do. It's just a matter of making sure that we go about doing it the right way. Because unfortunately, it's hotly contested. That means we're going to get a lot of pushback against people on the right. This is not just, oh, we shouldn't talk about it because it's such a taboo idea and we shouldn't try because it's too far off and unachievable. It is achievable. We just have to be more conscious and thoughtful with how we do it. That's it.
Every fight that's worth having starts off unpopular. Every new idea that challenges the sensibilities of the status quo will be met with resistance. This is the lesson that history teaches us again and again and again.
I acknowledged this before. They will lie about us. The other side will lie about us. It's just making sure that we make it as hard for them to lie about us as possible. All right?
Desegregation, democracy, women's liberation, gay marriage, free speech, ending apartheid, seatbelts. These things were fought for against overwhelming odds that eventually became less and less overwhelming. Along the way, I'm sure these ideas lost some people. But here we are in the better world they created.
There's kind of an implication, like right now, what Thought Slime is implying by argument is that what they did were the same things that he would advocate that we do now, and essentially try to achieve the same results. There's probably an argument that you can have people saying defund the police and other people saying the more reasonable version. I have to think more about that at this point, whether or not defund the police is viable to be able to have. But I mean, like, you know, I'm sure that at that point there was like a diversity of tactics where some people were advocating for the more inflammatory thing, then other people were advocating for the not so inflammatory, more, you know, reasoned, kind of more accessible approach to being able to think through these things, right? But the point being here is that, like, right now Thought Time is like implying that like, oh, well, those things happened because we didn't, rephrase or rethink how we approach these various topics. So if we do that there, then we must be able to do that here. And I don't think that there's enough evidence to be able to make that claim.
There are many more unpopular fights, and we either stand tall in our convictions or accept a world where nothing improves.
God damn it. Occam, help. Okay, so the rest is just the eyeball zone. Okay, I hope it's apparent to people who are watching this, right? I was not trying to go through and be like inflammatory. I'm not calling people like an idiot or whatever. Because I do think that this is a position which probably a lot of people in my chat, or at least like I do genuinely believe that the arguments that ThoughtSlime laid out are probably the positions that a lot of people in my chat and in the larger left community believe. I am always trying to think about how to win. And when I say I want to win, to me, winning is passing legislation that's going to materially improve the lives of everyone in our country. Obviously, I think that ThoughtSlime is operating from the same kind of perspective. I guess that I would, like, I'm just disappointed that, like, he essentially treats the counter arguments as very, like, infantilizing, when like there is real strategy to be had there. In the hypothetical at the beginning, there's a really strong argument. And I mean, this happens all the time in court, where by virtue of having a theme that can be flipped against you, you can lose an entire trial and your client can go to jail or worse. And unfortunately, the right gets this. And they have a lot more funding, and it means that the deck is stacked against us, and that sucks. Fortunately, the thing that we have on our side, though, is that we are right. And so it's a lot easier for us to be able to point out how the other side is wrong or lying or being disingenuous. But when we are also advocating for policies ourselves, we want to make sure that we are taking advantage of the same skills that they are so that we can be able to get to as close of an even playing field as is possible. That's all that I want.